Hello, welcome back to the studio. It's so nice to be back. I'm sorry I've been gone for so long. I've been struggling with a flare-up of a chronic health issue, which was making it very difficult for me to edit video. I'm feeling a lot better now, and I have a lot of content that I'm looking forward to sharing with you over the next weeks and months. I know that, like me, many of my viewers are stuck in various states of isolation and lockdown due to COVID-19. I hope that my illustration and studio content will help you get through this difficult time. Today I'm sharing with you a swatch with me video where I'm swatching this Daniel Smith extra fine watercolor Try It sheet. I actually swatched this some time ago, but again, just didn't get around to editing this video until recently. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Lee. I'm a botanical and natural science illustrator based in Kitchener-Waterloo, Canada. On this channel, I share watercolor techniques and tips and some insights into my daily life as an illustrator. If this is content that you're interested in, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hello, welcome back to the studio. Today we're doing another swatch with me video. So this is a real-time swatching video, and I'll be swatching the first page of this 238 color dot card from Daniel Smith. I'm very excited about this dot card. So I will be doing these other 3 pages in later videos. Today I'm just focusing on these yellow through reds and violets. I've already prepared swatch cards with all of the names of the colors and the pigment information. In my last swatch with me video, people asked me how I made my swatch cards, so I am using these 2 things. So the first one is a stamp. This is on an acrylic block. This is a stamp by Waffle Flower Crafts. I'll leave a link down below for where you can get this. It was $4 US plus shipping, and then I put that on an acrylic block. And I'm using archival pigment ink in this ink pad to ink my little swatch cards. I'm using Arches watercolor paper, which I cut down to size with a guillotine cutter. So I'm starting out with buff titanium, and I haven't used this color in a palette in a long while, but it was in one of my very first watercolor palettes that I put together when I first started painting. And it is very useful for mixing sort of dusty, minty greens for painting lichen with. So every so often I pull out, I still have a tube of this stuff. And it has a really nice texture. It's PW6:1. So this is a white pigment, but it's an unbleached titanium. It's got a nice, you can see a nice little granulation texture. It's got a nice little warmth to it. And it's nice for muting down colors without making them too much cooler. How does that look? Okay. The next color on this swatch sheet is Nickel Titanate Yellow, and this is, I will admit, my very least favorite pigment out of all of the watercolor pigments that I've tried. This isn't Daniel Smith's fault. I just really do not like this shade of yellow or this milky feeling. It's just, it seems, here we go. Maybe you'll see it a bit better if I bring this over. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out. I'm gonna use this paper to protect my sheet a little so that I can paint right over. Oh, sorry. And this will get easier as I work my way across the sheet, I think. So this is PY53. It's nickel titanate, and it's got this, I don't know, it makes me think of baby puke or that banana penicillin, which I actually really enjoyed. The banana penicillin. It's medicine that they give to children when you have an infection. I really enjoyed the taste of that, but I don't really want to paint with it. I really do not like these milky yellow colors at all. I like my yellows to be like liquid sunshine. Now, Bismuth Vanadate, on the other hand, is something that I have recently introduced to some of my palettes. Oh, you know what? I'm also going to use some clean water, and I'm going to paint across. So I am going to keep this dot card. I'm going to put this in the front of my swatch binder so that I can see the entire collection, or the entire dot card from each brand that I have. So I've bought a few other dot cards, and then in my swatch binder, the majority of my swatches then will be sorted by pigment. So then they'll be with other versions of the same pigment from different brands. But then I can look up by brand as well, and see other similar colors. So next, let's do Bismuth Vanadate. So Bismuth Vanadate is a color that it's a very opaque yellow, but it's very neon, so it doesn't have that same sort of milky feeling because it's so bright. And so I avoided this color for a long time because it's so opaque. Oh, whoops. But recently I tried it from a few different brands, and I actually quite like it. It's never going to be my favorite yellow just because I do prefer a more transparent yellow. But I don't hate it. And I'm going to try to get this a little brighter. Is that better? Sorry. Hopefully that's bright enough. There we go. Okay. So there's Bismuth Vanadate. And I can paint this out. So see how much more neon that is than the Nickel Titanate above it. So even though it's very opaque, I really like the shade of that, unlike the Nickel Titanate, which I really do not like. All right, next we have Hansa Yellow Light. So this is a much more transparent lemon yellow. I don't usually keep it in my palettes because it has a light fastness rating that's a little bit lower than perfect. It's a 2 rating by the ASTM. So it might fade a little bit. So I try to avoid it where I can. But it is a nice bright lemon yellow and very strongly tinting. And you'll see that it is much more transparent than the Bismuth Vanadate. So if you want a lemon yellow that is more transparent, and highly tinting, and you're not obsessive about light fastness, and hence a yellow light is still relatively light fast, it's just not perfect, then this is an option. And so I'm going to paint this out. I think that looks really cool. I do wish that these dot cards had the pigment information printed on them. So I got the pigment information from a Jackson's catalog. I'll leave the link to Jackson's down below. They publish a really wonderful free watercolor catalog that has all sorts of information from all of the different brands. But there's going to be some discrepancies in the notation, because it turns out that the notation on the Jackson's catalog is a little bit different than on this sheet. So Azo Yellow is like a really bright medium yellow. Again, it's fairly transparent, but you can see most yellows really do have a fair bit of opacity to them, especially when they're wet, which gives this sort of, it's this milky feeling that I really don't like. But that being said, this is a nice bright yellow. And I'm gonna move these out of the way. This is the downside, sorry, to painting up close like this, is unfortunately we are going to be missing some of these colors. Maybe I'll do it this way. Here, let's try to organize this way so that you can still see the last couple colors. Okay, so this is interesting. So Daniel Smith does not offer any cadmium colors, they only offer cadmium hues. But unlike some other brands, which shall not be named in this episode, Daniel Smith does list their pigments that they use in their cadmium colors. And most of their cadmium yellows are made with that PY53, which is that Nickel Titanate yellow and something else. So I guess the Nickel Titanate yellow adds some opacity, and then they add some other yellows to brighten it up. And whereas I don't really like the Nickel Titanate yellow on its own, I do have to admit that, for example, in this mix where we've got a cadmium yellow light hue, I do really like the behavior of this paint. Now, again, I tend to prefer much more transparent colors, so probably not going to go for this myself. This cadmium yellow light, but if I did want more of an opaque yellow or like a heavier yellow, then this is a really pretty color. Sort of lemon yellow, but more opaque. And then again, we'll just paint this out. So these are some fairly generous samples. I am able to paint out a full sample from each one, which is really nice. Here we have cadmium yellow medium hue, and sorry, yeah, Let's see if I move this over. Can you still see what I'm doing? Okay. So let me know if this is the sort of zoom level that you want to see, or whether you would prefer me to zoom in even further or zoom in further out. Here I'm trying to show you the samples that I already painted as well as what I'm currently painting, because they do change a little bit as they dry. So this is a nice middle yellow, sort of on the warm, slightly on the warm side. If I paint that out. That's really lovely. So I'm probably not going to add it to my palette, but I can really appreciate how pretty that color is. Okay, Aureolin, Cobalt Yellow. So this is one of those classic colors. It's probably not, it's probably something that you want to avoid in most of your work because it's not light fast and it doesn't fade in a pretty way. It sort of turns like greenish brown, which is unfortunate because it's one of the few relatively transparent yellows and it's non-staining. So I'm going to film my lifting tests on these, but it's a really pretty color. These colors have all been re-wetting really nicely. So sometimes I find that Daniel Smith can be a little bit tricky to re-wet. But I don't know if they've reformulated since the last time I swatched a sheet like this, or possibly it's just because we recently installed a humidifier here at home. So the air's a little bit more humid than it has been in the past in the winter. And the winter can get quite dry in here. But we've now got a humidifier, so it might just be that the air's a little bit more humid. So that's a really pretty color. It's really too bad that it's not at all light fast. Okay, next, Lemon Yellow. So I'm gonna move this up. Lemon Yellow. So Lemon Yellow is made with PY 175. And it's one of the most transparent yellow pigments, but it's also fairly low tinting, and it has a sort of slimy dispersion where it sticks to the brush, which isn't the nicest feeling in the world. So I do keep Lemon Yellow on my, I keep PY 175 on my studio palette. Because sometimes I want to mix like a really bright green and you need a very green slanted yellow to do that, and a bright yellow. But it's not my favorite paint in terms of paint behavior. This is a very pretty version though, and I do find that it behaves quite well given the pigment. Like, this is a problem with the pigment, not with the manufacturer. Okay. Right, so we can paint this whole row, and the final paint on this row is going to be Cadmium Yellow Deep. Which is, this is a really nice juicy color. So pretty. I really, really like that shade. Again, I'm probably not going to add it to my palette because it's fairly opaque, but but that's a property of cadmium paints. So if you're more of an opaque painter, like you are more used to gouache or something, and you prefer to work with somewhat more opaque pigments, this is a really lovely color. It's made with PY53, which is that Nickel Titanate yellow, and PY83, which is more of a golden yellow color. Okay. All right. If I move these over here. Sorry. Yep, okay. Just trying to... All right, and put this down here so you can see that. And then I will paint this out here. That's really lovely. Okay, so if I move one over, rinse out my brush, bring this down just a tad. Bring it over here. Okay. And I'm going to drop some water on each of these. All right. Okay, so next we are going to start with Hansa Yellow Medium. And so this color is frequently recommended by a lot of different artists. And so it was one of the first colors that I bought when I was buying tubes of watercolor, because it was suggested by Jane Blundell and a number of other people. And it's a lovely, lovely color. It's a lovely middle yellow, just very slightly on the golden side. It does have a little bit of opacity, as most yellows do, but it dries nearly completely transparent. It's a beautiful color on its own. It's made with PY97. So you'll find this on a lot of beginner sets. Really pretty yellow. All right. Okay. So that's about where I'm at. Okay. And next, we're going to try Mayan Yellow. And so the Mayan colors I believe they're all, they're various pigments that are like vat pigments that are fixed onto a clay base. And some of them have pigment numbers and some of them don't. So Mayan Yellow has a pigment number PY223. But Daniel Smith offers a variety of different Mayan colors. I'm going to put this here for now so you can see it as it dries. And it's a really lovely paint. It's got sort of a creamy consistency, even though it's fairly transparent. I wonder how it'll dry. Next we have Naples Yellow. And Naples Yellow is I think this would be described as Caucasian skin tone, although of course if you were painting a Caucasian skin tone you'd probably want to mix it and add shadows and stuff. Don't really have a use for this color for the sorts of work that I do. It's sort of a peachy color. Very, very light. Could probably use it to mute down other colors. My cat keeps leaving hairs everywhere. Well, I guess there's going to be a cat hair embedded in here. Okay, and so then we can paint out Naples Yellow here. Next we have Indian Yellow, which is made with PY97, which is that Hansa Yellow medium, and PY150, which is Nickel Yellow. I hope I didn't miss too much. Sorry, my camera just... I'm sorry, my camera just died. I hope I didn't miss too much. I've zoomed in very slightly more. Let me know if this is better or worse for you. I'm now painting Iso-Indoline Yellow. The last color that I painted was New Gamboge, and prior to that I painted Hansa Yellow Deep. So the next thing that I'm painting is Iso-Indoline Yellow, which is PY139, and it's a third one of these tangerine-like colors. Well, sorry. Let's see if I can get this in frame. Okay. All very pretty colors. I think so far of these tangerine colors, I like the PY65 Hansa Yellow Deep the best. And I am going to clear up some of these other paints that are now mostly dry. And start moving over Next, we're going to do Permanent Yellow Deep, which is made with PY110. And once again, this is going to be one of those tangerine-like colors. So the thing about having 238 colors on this sheet is that inevitably we're going to get some similarities. There's only so many different shades you can have. So it's a little bit hard to tell the difference between some of them. I think this one though might be my favorite of the various shades of tangerine. It seems to have a little bit more depth maybe than some of the other ones, like more variation. I do like it when the wash color is a little bit different from the mass tone. It gives it a little bit more depth to the paint. I do like that. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm gonna paint that out then. It's really pretty. I did once have a PY110 in my palette, but I got that one from M. Graham, and I think I like this Daniel Smith version better. The next color is a relatively new introduction to the Daniel Smith line, so I've never tried it because it was introduced before the last time I swatched one of these sheets. It's Aussie Red Gold. I did try an Aussie Red Gold made with the same three pigments by Art Spectrum in my last video. This Daniel Smith version looks a little bit more orange. It is really pretty though. Do like it. Okay, so we're gonna add a little bit more water. See how it washes out. That's really pretty. I really like the depth in this. I could definitely see using this in a palette. I like how the different pigments in here interact. That's really gorgeous. Let's see how it dries. And let's paint this out. Next we have Pyrrole Orange. This is made with PO73, and this is going to be your standard orange. It's going to be, you know, a very orange. Like a traffic cone. Or a safety vest. It's got some opacity to it. It's just a standard orange. I'm really liking how that Aussie Red Gold is drying too. That is a really pretty color. Friend of mine, Candace Leland, she's another, she's a watercolor artist, and a while back she was going crazy about Aussie Red Gold when it first came out, and we couldn't find it at any of the local stores. I think it's in all of the stores now, but at the time I just thought it was a little bit goofy, but having tried it, I totally understand her. Thank you, Candace. That is a gorgeous color. I might want to add it to my palette. That's really pretty. Okay, next we have the next line of these. And how are we going to handle this? With all of my wet paint and all of the... Maybe if I put the paint on the other side? Or turn this over. Maybe I'll turn this over this way. Okay, so I'm going to try that. I'm going to put these here. And Let's see. Maybe if I turn it this way? Yeah, okay, what if I do that? And I put this here. Okay. I'm just gonna wet these. No, this is goofy. It's a little awkward because I'm working left to right and I'm right-handed. But then I also want to show you the paints as they're drying, so I need to store them somewhere, and I also don't want to be too far away. Lots of challenges here. Okay. If I bring this down here, and we're gonna start here. Okay, so next we have Permanent Orange, a bit closer here. Permanent Orange. And it's interesting, the Pyrrole Orange came first. And usually these are in spectrum order, but the Permanent Orange to my eye seems a lot more of a lighter tone, like a more yellowy tone. More in that tangerine family from earlier. It's lovely. It's a little bit more transparent than the Pyrole Orange. I think I like that shade of orange better than the Pyrole Orange. So here we have the Pyrole Orange, and there we have the Permanent Orange. I am going to zoom out just a little. This is difficult to manage. Hopefully that's still close enough for you to see. Do let me know in the comments below what sort of distance you want to these swatches. Okay, and hopefully that'll work. There we go. Okay. Oh, and I'm getting my hand all dirty. We'll put this here. Okay, next we've got Cadmium Orange Hue, and like the other cadmium hues, this is made with PY53, which is that Nickel Titanate yellow over here. And then it's also, in this case, it's mixed with PO73, which is the Pyrole Orange, and PY83, which is a golden yellow color. It's interesting, they don't have PY83 as a color on its own, I don't think, in the Daniel Smith line, but they do include it in many, many mixes. So you can see there's more of an opacity here, there's a heaviness to the pigment. Yeah, I really liked some of the cadmium yellow hues. I'm not crazy about this cadmium orange. Okay. I do like how this sheet looks with all of the colors though. All right, next, Paramount Orange, PO43. This is another one of those oranges. It's very similar to the Pyrrole Orange. I like this one slightly better if I had to choose between the two. This is like your traffic cone orange. And next we're going to do, oh, what if I bring these up so you can see them a little bit better? I have to keep moving them. Okay, and next we have Cadmium Red Scarlet Hue, which again, that's made with PY53, which is that Nickel Titanate Yellow, and PR254, which is a Pyrrole Red, which is your standard fire truck red. And let's see about painting this. So you'll see here, this is just this is your standard like primary school fire truck red, or like race car red. And you'll see it's quite opaque. Good basic red. Cadmium's Red Scarlet Hue. But unlike real cadmiums, this is non-toxic. That's nice. Okay, and then I can paint that out. Okay, and then this is interesting. Next is transparent Pyrole Orange, PO71. Now several brands offer this pigment, but most versions of PO71 are more of an orange color, whereas the Daniel Smith version is, I believe, more of a really scarlet color, like it's quite red. This one isn't so far off, actually. They may have, I think I heard somewhere that they reformulated it, so now it's a little bit closer to the other versions of transparent Pyrrole Orange, like they got a different batch of pigment. It is still quite a reddish orange, but especially in washes, you'll see this comes down to like really an orange. In mass tone, it's more of a red. Beautiful color. I really like this. So I've had PO71 from a number of different brands, never Daniel Smith. This is a really, really beautiful color. Quite nice. I have the Schminke version and the core version. Also my favorite transparent Pyrrole Orange right now is the Winsor Newton version, which is made with a different pigment. PO107, I believe. But it's very, very similar to this. This is just a little bit more reddish than other PO71s. And as it dries, it seems to be becoming more red too. So possibly that's part of it. It's quite a reddish orange. Next we have Organic Vermilion. So that Cadmium Red Scarlet, as it's drying, is drying to much more of a cooler red, or at least a middle red, and sort of standing out in between the pigments around it. Organic vermilion is what I would call a coral color. It's a very orangey red. Next we have Mayan Orange. So this is another one of those Mayan colors that's a pigment fixed onto a clay base, I believe. Or a vat dye fixed onto a clay base. It's got a light fastness of 2, but supposedly the clay base is supposed to make these pigments more light fast than just the dyes that they use. And so this Mayan Orange, I mean, it's called orange, really looks quite red. But I think it's just because there's a Mayan Red that's more on the pinky side. So this is more of a corally red, so they're gonna call it Mayan Orange. Okay, I need to move over some of my pigments again. Wait, one moment, I'm gonna paint this one out. A little bit of texture that shows up in these Mayan colors. They're not considered granulating, but they do have a little bit of texture to them. There we go. I'm gonna move this off. All right, so next we can move this up and paint the last 3 on this row, which are going to be Quinacridone Coral. Quinacridone Coral is made with PR209, which is a quinacridone red pigment. Many other brands call this shade Quinacridone Red. Quinacridone Coral is perhaps a better descriptor of it because it's definitely got a sort of orangey overtone and a pinky undertone that really does make you think of coral. It's not, you know, it's definitely in the red family, but you wouldn't necessarily, this isn't necessarily when you think of the color red, the color that comes to mind. It really is reminiscent of coral, though. It's a really beautiful color. It's very intense. Sometimes PR209s can be a little bit more, I guess, shyer than some other quinacridones. But this version is quite intense, and it's got this beautiful pinky undertone. Really gorgeous. I could definitely see including this in a palette at some point. Mind you, I could probably see including most colors in a palette at some point because I like color a lot. I have too many paints. I have a problem. Then I try these paints, I try these dot cards, and I just want to include all of them. Oh, maybe I just start thinking of all the things I could use these paints for. Colorholics Anonymous. All right, so here we go. And so now we're really getting into the true scarlet reds. So here we have Pyrrole Scarlet Pr 255. So this will be one of your reds. And this has a substantial opacity to it. But now we're really getting into that sort of fire truck shade. There we go. And I can paint that out. And then the last color on this row will be Perylene Scarlet. And this is PR 149. Well, that's gorgeous. This is listed as a granulating color, which is a little surprising to me. I didn't know that Perylenes were really known for granulation at all ever. So we'll see how the granulation goes on this. This is like a lipstick red, that classic candy apple red, maybe? Yeah, like a candy apple red. Oh, I really like it. It's gorgeous. That is so pretty. I really love Perylene colors, like all of them. Always love Perylenes. Perylenes and quinacridones. All these really intense, powerful, punchy colors. My friends and I joke around that I like bully pigments in my watercolor palette, and so this is really gorgeous. I don't have it yet. That might change because look how pretty it is. Put that here. And then I'm going to take a quick break to replace my water, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now we are on the fourth line, so we've done half this sheet, and I'm gonna get started with the next color, which is Cadmium Red Medium Hue. So again, Daniel Smith doesn't use real cadmium colors. They have hues for all of them. Their hues seem to mostly be made using PY53, which is that Nickel Titanate yellow, which I really do not like nickel titanate on its own, but I have to say it is making some really beautiful cadmium hues. And although I don't use cadmiums very much, I can appreciate that cadmiums have this sort of heaviness to them, which can be really useful in some contexts. And I do feel like these paints really capture that really nicely. So if you are the sort of person who really likes that cadmium-like behavior, but you'd like to avoid cadmiums, the Daniel Smith cadmium hues do a pretty good job. And they are really nice and vibrant too. So, not really the colors for me, but they're really nice hues if you are looking for a cadmium. Really like how they settle into the paper. That's really convincing. From my experience, limited experience with cadmiums, that's pretty much how they behave. Okay. And I'm sticking my finger in my swatches again. Okay. Move this out of the way. So the yellows are a little interesting because I don't really use, I use PY150, which is Nickel Azo Yellow, which isn't on this sheet, it's on a later sheet, and I basically use very little else in the way of yellows. And I'm pretty picky about my reds too, but now we're getting into the cooler reds, and this is where there's some really interesting stuff that I'm really looking forward to on this sheet. Pyrrole Red. Pyrole Red is your standard red. This is what you'll see in many starter sets, as in the red spot. Like other brands have it as, you know, this is the Winsor Red by Winsor Newton, PR254. So this is a really nice middle of the road red. It's got some opacity to it. I tend to go for somewhat more transparent pigments. But it is really nice if you want that red. Okay, there we go. So you can see the Cadmium Red hue is this Nickel Titanate plus the Pyrrole Red over here. And so you can see how that results in this more scarlety color of the cadmium hue, and a little bit more heavy like the Nickel Titanate. Okay, next we have Perylene Red, and I have this pigment from Schmincke, and I really love it. I don't always include a true red on my palettes. Oh, I've forgotten to pre-wet these. Okay, I'm gonna pre-wet the rest of them. Sorry about the Perylene Red. So I have Perylene Red from Schmincke on several of my palettes. I don't always include a true red at all. Sometimes I just use an orange and a magenta color. But when I do include a red, I really like Perylene Red, or PR178, as a red option. It's quite, it's relatively transparent. I like how it flows. Really like the Perylenes in general, and it's a little bit dark. And I think I prefer somewhat darker reds. Like, rather than it being a really fire trick red, I prefer that more of a candy apple shade of reds. And this is very slightly on the cool side, where there's a bit of like a pinky undertone to it. Not very much. It's pretty close to a middle red. If you are going to be looking for like a red rather than a magenta. I really like that. That's a really nice version of that Perylene Red pigment. That's really lovely. Look at how that Aussie Red Gold has dried as well. Still really in love with that. I think I might have to get me some Aussie Red Gold. Okay, Permanent Red. So permanent red is PR 170, which is a pigment I'm not super familiar with. That's very red. I don't really know what else to say about that. You know what? I really like that. And the neat thing is that's a series 1. So series in watercolor paints are price brackets. So series 1 is the cheapest, and higher series are more expensive. And so often it's really difficult to get reds in series 1. Most reds would be a series 2, 3, or even higher. Just because the pigments that are used to make reds tend to be expensive. And this is a really lovely red color. And it's a series 1, PR 170. Now it is rated a 2 in light fastness. So that might be a concern if you want the most light fast pigments. You might want to look into that a little bit more, but that's a really nice red. I like it. I think I like it better than the Pyrrole Red. Okay, I'm gonna move all of this stuff over again. Just put that there, and then we're gonna see Permanent Red Deep, which is going to be another it's a different shade of the same PR 170 pigment. Oh, you know what? I think I like that one even better. That's really pretty. I like slightly more pinky reds, I think, in general. Or if I do use a more orangey red, I tend to go much more into the orange side, like into the true oranges almost. Yep, that's beautiful. And here, whoops. Okay. Next we have Quinacridone Red, and this is made with PV19, which is one of the most commonly used pigments in watercolor. And I believe that Daniel Smith has 3 versions of PV19, so this is the most reddish one. And you can see it is still pretty pink. But like a reddish pink. Although the undertone is very, very pinky. And then the next color I'm very curious about because I've heard about it a bunch. And I think I didn't include it in my original palette when I was first building my first watercolor palettes because I'd heard some mixed reviews of its light fastness. But this is Anthraquinone Red, which is one of the most transparent reds. And Daniel Smith rates it as light fastness 1, according to their own tests, which is the highest light fastness. It is the synthetic version of Alizarin Crimson. But some other tests, like Bruce McEvoy of Handprint, many years ago, did some testing on this pigment, and although he found that the Daniel Smith version was fairly light fast, some others were less so, and so he said to avoid this pigment. And there are better alternatives, and the truth is, this is gorgeous. So I would really, really love to use this. I'm going to be starting my own light fastness tests. I would really, really like to include this in my palette. And Daniel Smith does rank it as light fastness 1, so it's probably safe. But look at how beautiful that is, that gorgeous candy apple. Oh. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to try to find a way to include this in my palette, because that is so pretty. That is such a pretty red. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, definitely going to try to include that. Let's see how it dries. I hope it dries with some of that same intensity. That's really pretty. I like how dark it is. I really like darker reds, I think. And I like how transparent it is. How nicely it flows. Oh, that's so beautiful. Okay, so I really, really hope that when I run, I'm going to buy some of this, and then I'm going to run some light fastness tests. And I really, really hope that it's going to come out acceptable so that I can use it in my watercolor work, because I think that's really pretty and I want to use it. Okay, next, Mayan Red. This is one of those other Mayan colors, and so the Mayan colors have a little bit more weight to them. This is listed as transparent. Also, it's listed as granulating. Yeah, the Mayan colors all have a little bit more of a, like maybe they just have more binder, or maybe it's that clay base, but you'll see like it's showing more of these brush strokes as I push it around. It's not spreading in that beautiful way that that beautiful Anthraquinone Red is. I really want to use this in my palette. Okay, that's gorgeous. Next, we're going to try Alizarin Crimson, which is the natural version of Anthraquinone Red, and it's highly fugitive. This paint doesn't last at all. It's really pretty. I have avoided it for years. I finally did try some, because I got a sample sent to me of Billy Scholl's Sennelier set, which includes Alizarin Crimson, and I now understand why people want to use Alizarin Crimson, even though it is extremely fugitive, because it is just so beautifully transparent and so nice and dark. I mean, this is a gorgeous paint, but I wouldn't use this because it's definitely just going to disappear within years. Like, even hanging inside of the house, even with protection, it's just going to fade within just a few years. So I would never want to sell work made with Alizarin Crimson, even though it is gorgeous. Which is why I'm so excited about this Anthraquinone Red. Because if I can get the Anthraquinone Red, and it's definitely more light fast than the Alizarin Crimson. The question is whether it's light fast enough that I would feel comfortable including it in my palette, because I tend to be quite fussy about light fastness. Just because I do sell original paintings for hundreds of dollars, so I, don't want to run any risks. Yeah. So I will run my own tests for the Anthraquinoid, but I think I could probably use this, and it is really pretty. Daniel Smith does also run their own light fastness tests, so their ratings, they're quite open about how they run them, and their ratings are fairly reliable. So if they say something is a light fastness 1, it probably actually is. And even Bruce McEvoy over at Handprint, I believe that in his rating, other brands of this pigment had lower light fastness, but the Daniel Smith had not faded. So permanent Alizarin Crimson, on the other hand, which is what I'm painting out now, is a hue made from PR 177, PV 19, which is that Quinacridone Red, and PR 149, which is the Perylene Scarlet. And it's supposed to be the closest copy to Alizarin Crimson. In terms of hue, it is very, very close, but in terms of behavior, I would say that the Anthraquinoid Red more closely mimics how the Alizarin Crimson behaves. It has that very light, beautiful spreading, whereas this has a little bit more weight to it, like most pigments do. Doesn't have that beautiful depth and light glazing. Okay, so here we have these. And I'm going to put this here and start clearing up. And then we're going to move on to here. And the first paint on this row is Rhodonite Genuine, which I swatched in my last video. And so I'm not going to, I haven't made a card for Rhodonite because I already made a card from the other set of paints, the Primatech set of paints for Rhodonite Genuine. So instead of, sorry, hopefully I remember to cut this stuff out. This is going to be a mess. Okay, so next we're going to start this next row. And on the very first we have Rhodonite Genuine. I am going to cut out, sorry. Next I'm pre-wetting all of these colors. And I'm going to start with Rhodonite Genuine. But because I already swatched Rhodonite Genuine in the Mineral Marvel set, I'm just going to swatch it right on this page. I'm not going to try to make a separate swatch of it because I already have a better swatch. So Rhodonite Genuine is from the Primatech line, and the Primatechs they're made with natural minerals. Rhodonite is this beautiful pink color. It unfortunately does fade. It's got a light fastness rating of 1, however it oxidizes. So with or without light, it will get less vibrant. Okay, next, if I move this over here, I'm going to swatch Carmine. Oh, that's beautiful. That's so pretty. This is PR 176. I really like this color. Ooh, whoops. I got a carmine paint, like a permanent carmine paint from Da Vinci, which turned out to be the one tube that I've actually run through without ever including in a palette. It's sort of similar to this, although that one is made with PV19. It's a little bit more muted and less pink. But I imagine that I would probably run through this in a similar way. This is PR 176. It's got a light fastness rating of 2. Which is still good. I generally try to stick to light fastness 1. Some of my paints I do use light fastness 2, especially if they've been independently tested and usually test well in watercolors. And Carmine is fairly light fast as well, despite that slightly lower rating. And it's really pretty. Okay, so next we have Rose Madder Permanent. So this is a hue that's meant to imitate Rose Madder. This is a lot brighter than most true Rose Madder paints. But Rose Madder is very fugitive, so this hue is made with a bunch of quinacridones and it'll last forever. A light fastness rating of 1. It's pretty soft, so I tend to go for punchier colors that I can just add more water to make them soft like this. But if you want something that's a little bit gentler right out of the pan, that's a nice option. I am liking how nicely these paints are all re-wetting and the size of these dots. It's really nice. I'm liking looking at all of these paints all together on this sheet. They look beautiful all together here. Okay, next we've got Opera Pink. So this is Series 4, or sorry, not Series 4. Light Fastness 4, which is, it's fugitive. It's not going to stick around. It is made with a mix of PR 122, which is the pigment listed, but it's also got a rhodamine dye, basic resin dye. This one is listed as granulating, which is interesting. Usually, oh my goodness, this is very bright. I've seen opera pinks. I own some opera pinks. This is so bright. My goodness. Oh, okay. So the other interesting thing is the dye here, because it's bound to a resin and it's not ground very finely, this opera pink granulates. Most other opera pinks do not granulate, but the Daniel Smith Opera Pink does granulate. So if that's something that you would like in your Opera Pink, this is an option for you. I'll put this over here and you can see what it does as it dries. Next we have Potter's Pink. And this is where it's nice that I re-wet it, because Potter's Pink can be a little bit tough to re-wet. It does seem to be re-wetting really nicely. So I don't know if this is because my house now has a humidifier and so everything is staying a little bit tacky, or if it's a change in Daniel Smith's formula. I hope it's a change in Daniel Smith's formula, because in the past some of their paints could be a little bit tricky to re-wet sometimes. And so if they've adjusted their formula so that everything's just a little bit easier to re-wet, that would be lovely. That would be amazing. Sorry, missed a little bit of footage there, but here is Potter's Pink, which is a little bit tricky to re-wet, but it's doing fairly well. I don't know if Daniel Smith has changed their formula, or if it's just that my house is a little bit more humid than it usually is in the winter because we just got a humidifier. But I was just saying that Potter's Pink was a color that I avoided for many years because it's low tinting and it's granulating. And I tend to prefer higher tinting non-granulating colors for most of my mixing, but I find it's really nice for adding some texture and a little bit of interesting color to some dry, like dry foliage, or when I'm painting like little twigs and brambles and lichen. I do really like adding just a little bit of Potter's Pink, and so this is really nice. My preferred brand for Potter's Pink is Schminke. It does re-wet a little bit more easily than this one, but this one's a bit more granulating. Okay, next we have Quinacridone Pink. And Quinacridone Pink, I'm going to pull out over here, is a PV19 like this Quinacridone Red. But the Quinacridone Pink is going to be pinker. So they are very similar. You wouldn't need both of these in the same palette by any means. But if you wanted more of a magenta shade, then you would pick the Quinacridone Pink. And if you wanted something that could double as like more of a true red, then you might choose the Quinacridone Red. Okay. So I am liking how bright that opera is. Now, unfortunately, opera, as well as being fugitive, doesn't scan very well, so I don't have very much use for it in my works. I can't use it to sell originals because it would fade, and I can't use it to sell prints or commercial commissions because I can't scan it. And I'm a bit of a corporate shill. I can't really... I'm money motivated. If I can't make money with it, I don't buy it. The Opera Pink is really beautiful and I can't use it. It's a little upsetting. Okay, next we have Quinacridone, oh sorry, Quinacridone Pink. What was I saying? I read the wrong thing. Quinacridone Pink is PV42. It is not. Earlier I said Quinacridone Pink was PV19. It is not PV19. This is PV19, Quinacridone Rose. Okay, now let's compare this. Here I was looking at it and being like, that's not really behaving the same. Anyway, you definitely wouldn't need any two of those. So you choose one. But the Quinacridone Rose is going to be a somewhat more pinky version of this Quinacridone Red pigment, the PV19. And this is PV42. It's something different, but very similar. Okay, so next we are going to move these over, move these, hey, oh my goodness, over, and get paint everywhere. Okay, next we're going to try Quinacridone Lilac. Quinacridone Lilac is PR122. So this is what I use as one of my primaries in my triad. I make a cyan, magenta, yellow primary triad, and I include this as the magenta. Now, I have used a number of brands. I haven't used Daniel Smith yet because they didn't used to make PR122. He had this crazy line that had a huge range of paints that didn't include some of my most used pigments, and they've since introduced a bunch of them, and they're introducing a bunch more. So at this point, I maybe could use Daniel Smith for more of my painting. But this is a nice, bright, slightly on the blue side for a magenta, but it's very, very vibrant. It's one of the most vibrant magenta colors, which is why, of course, it's used as the base for that opera pink as well. It's really lovely. So many other brands will call this Quinacridone Magenta, which is why you need to be careful when you're shopping to shop by pigment rather than just paint name. Next, we have what Daniel Smith calls Quinacridone Magenta, which is PV19, but it's the more violet version of PV19. And it is also a magenta tone, but it is much more muted. So it's less useful if you are using magenta as a primary color, because this would mix very muted secondary mixes. It is useful, however, as a shadow color. So if you are using a magenta, like if you're mixing with reds and pinks and you are using this magenta color just as a shadow color for your reds, or for mixing dark colors, then this PV19 Quinacridone Magenta is more useful to you. The interesting thing about Quinacridone Magenta, I can see it on the screen a little bit, is that it shows up on screens and scans much bluer than it does in real life. So that's just something to be a little bit aware of. Something to be aware of with a lot of watercolors is they sometimes scan or photograph differently than what they look like in real life, so you need to figure that out if you're going to be selling scans or digitizing your work. Okay, next we have Pyrrole Crimson, which is PR 264. It's interesting, this seems like we're back in the reds, like we've been going more and more and more magenta, and now we're back into the red territory. And now looking at these colors, I can see that the permanent Alizarin Crimson has dried a lot duller than the true Alizarin Crimson. And also even that the Anthraquinone Red has dried a little bit duller. Although it is doing a bit better on my own paper. So that's a little disappointing because I'm wanting to experiment with more pigments and, you know, reconsider some things that I eliminated because of light fastness, but I'm not going to use Alizarin Crimson. Alizarin Crimson is just going to fade right away. Anyway, so here's Pyrrole Crimson. Okay, and now I have my very last line here. And so I'm going to clean these up a little. Pick up all of these colors. Okay, and now I don't really need to cover this side, but I do need to cover here. Okay, so here we have Quinacridone Fuchsia. Yeah, let's move this out just a little. Okay, let's do Quinacridone Fuchsia. So this is PR 202, which if you have seen the Quinacridone Lilac, is that still showing? Yeah, so the Quinacridone Lilac is one version of a magenta tone. PR 202 is another frequent Quinacridone magenta color. This one's a little bit more muted, but not quite as muted as that PV19 Quinacridone magenta we just tested. It's a little bit more reddish. So I like the Quinacridone Lilac best, but this one's pretty nice too. So this would be another option if you wanted a slightly more muted magenta for mixing. Okay, next I have Mayan Violet. So this is another one of those Mayan colors. That's really beautiful. I really like that. I'm really sure what I would use that for. Again, given that I already have a magenta on all of my palettes, but it is really pretty. It does have a little bit of a glugginess to it. A lot of the Mayan colors do, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I mean, I guess maybe that's the feature, but it's like there's just a little bit too much binder in there. Let's spread that out. This is a granulating color, so we'll see how the granulation looks. There. Okay. Next. Bordeaux. So this is a color I've been really super excited to try. I've heard great things about it. I don't know why I don't even remember swatching it out the first time I had one of these sheets. Oh, that's so pretty. Oh, that's gorgeous. I hope it keeps some of that intensity. That's really pretty. I really like that. Oh. So I've been including Perylene Violet in all of my palettes, and I use it for mixing shadows, but I don't use it for really anything else because I find it too dull. So I've been looking for something that I could use in its place, and this might be the answer. Because this Bordeaux is just, that's just a fabulous color. I love that. So I've swatched one sheet of this, and I've already added three paints to my shopping list. I have enough paint to last me a lifetime, and I'm adding paints to my shopping list. Okay. Here we go. This is so pretty. I like how it's got more of a violet undertone. I am spreading. Help. That's really pretty.
Sorry, I'll be done in a sec.
No, it's fine. Stop talking.
What's that? I interrupt you.
Just whatever. I have to cut it. I have to cut this out now, but until you started talking, we were good. Okay, next we have Quinacridone Violet, which is another one of these PV19s. So they have, 4 PV19s in this line. And Quinacridone Violet then is going to be a much more violet version, which indeed it is. This seems weirdly more opaque than other PV19s. I like it. It's pretty. So this might also be another option that I could use in place of that Perylene Violet, I guess. Although that Bordeaux just has something. We'll see how it dries, but I'm really liking the look of that. So I'll see if I can maybe include that in one of my palettes coming up. Next we have Permanent Violet. So this was previously, up until fairly recently, made with PR88, which is Thio Indigo Violet. I'm assuming that this is the new version on this sheet, but unfortunately they don't list what pigments they're using. The new version is made with PR202 and PB29. And it is also very pretty. Now this PR202 and PB29 version would almost certainly be light fast, Thio Indigo Violet, although it's rated light fastness 1 in the Daniel Smith line, and they do their own testing. It is a vat dye with variable light fastness, so I had avoided it in the past, but this is also very pretty. Oh, okay. It's interesting that this is made with PB29 because I'm not really seeing too much granulation. I really like that. Okay, so that's another candidate for replacing my Perylene Violet. I use the Perylene Violet all the time for shadows, but I really just don't like it on its own, so I've been trying to find something just a little bit more vibrant to replace it with. And I think really any of these colors in here would do fine for that. This is lovely. Okay, so put that down. Okay, now we're gonna swatch the Perylene Violet. So I don't have the Daniel Smith version, but I do have Perylene Violets from other brands, which I have in most of my palettes, and I mix it with Perylene Green to make a really dark, deep shadow tone, and it's really useful in that way. Hello! Are you helpful? So you might hear the cat. And here is Perylene Violet. So you'll see it's much more muted than some of these other colors. And it dries even duller. So if it dried the way it looks when it's wet, then it would be fine. But I just find that it's just a little bit too dull to use for anything other than like the deepest shadows. Which is too bad. I like my paints to have multiple purposes and mix with multiple things on my palette. So even though I include Perylene Violet on every single one of my palettes and use it in almost every one of my paintings, I am looking for a replacement. Little problem. Okay. So we'll see how all of these dry. There's some promising stuff in there, particularly that Bordeaux. Okay, next we have Cobalt Violet. Cobalt Violet. It's a little bit tricky to re-wet, but I've given it some time, so hopefully it'll do all right. You'll see it's very, very light valued. And the sample is pretty small on this sheet. Despite being pre-wet quite thoroughly, it's not really wanting to come up. I could have Cobalt Violet, but you know, much stronger tinting. Similar shade, but like re-wet more easily and build up to that intensity more easily, then I would maybe like this color. As it is though, never found a use for it. It's just a little too wimpy for me. Okay. And now, let's bring this all the way up to here. And do these last three paints. So next we have Cobalt Violet Deep. This one's re-wetting more easily than the other Cobalt Violet. So I can get a nice tone there. And here. Really nice granulation. Okay, put that down here. Next we're gonna try Ultramarine Red, which is called red. It's called Ultramarine Red, but it's really like a reddish ultramarine, so it's quite purple. It's a very cool purple color. Like this. It's not red at all. But it's also got some really interesting granulation. Daniel Smith has a lot of really highly granulating colors that are super interesting. And the final color on this sheet is going to be this Rose of Ultramarine. And so this is made with PB29 and PB19, so it separates and creates some really interesting effects. Because it's got a non-granulating paint and a non-granulating pigment and a granulating pigment mixed together in the same paint. And so the granulating ultramarine separates out. There we go. Okay, so that's really pretty. Here we go. Okay, and finally, let's just paint this out. I can rearrange all of my color sheets, and then I can show you all of the colors together. Oops. There we go. And let's zoom this out a little bit. Okay, so we can put this over here and over there. And all right, so this is my finished swatch sheet. And then I've also got all of these swatches all done up. And I'll put these in my swatch binder, and then I'll put some holes through this one, and I'll keep this at the front of my swatch binder so that I can see all of these colors. In some future videos, I'm going to swatch the greens and browns and the effects colors, also from the Daniel Smith line. I hope you enjoyed this swatching video. I have quite a bit of content lined up for you over the next several weeks and months that'll hopefully help you get through this difficult isolation time. I'll be swatching the rest of the Daniel Smith watercolor trial sheets, the rest of this set. I also want to show you around my studio and share with you some of my process for creating finished illustrations. If this is content that you're interested in, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that you'll be notified when my next video comes out. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.